Welcome to another edition of the Dean Legge Show here on Dog Post, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, iTunes, everywhere. Let's get right into it. Big, long, interesting week at Georgia this week with the Dogs. In a kind of a 9-day window, winning the Sugar Bowl over Baylor. That probably means that Georgia will end the season as the number 4 team in the country. They've not had a bunch of top fives through history, but they've had quite a few this century, I guess you could say. And then, the departure of Jake Fromm, whatever in the world was going on with Cade Mays. Now he's at Tennessee. Then you've got the addition of Jamie Newman. You also had 2 5-star players commit to Georgia. We still have signing day that's left this month, next month in a few weeks. The national championship game is Monday night, and then after that you'll have the coaching convention, and then recruiting will begin immediately after that. And it will be an interesting time just to see how Georgia wraps up this class. They can still capture the number 1 class in the country. In fact, if they add 2 people, they probably will be the number 1 class in the country. But nonetheless, I think the biggest thing is to keep Broderick Jones, Cedric Van Pran as well. Certainly those guys could be your tackles of the future. They could be tackles of 2020 in many ways. A lot of people are I want to talk about the offensive line just for a moment, because when you lose Cade Mays, who probably would have played a tackle spot, if not left tackle, it makes you wonder about what's going to be next for Georgia at these spots. I'm not so sure they're in as bad a position as everybody else thinks they are. I mean, you will probably return Ben Cleveland, and then you've got your center returning in Trey Hill. There have been other guys, Justin Schaefer, who have started or played a lot. And then obviously with the guys who have been developing the last year or two, as well as the kids coming in, you've got a lot of options there. Clay Webb, and I don't have the board straight in front of me, but Owen Condon and obviously Warren Erickson started in the Sugar Bowl. So this offensive line at Georgia is hardly in real dire straits. You also have Tate Ratledge, who looks like he could be a right tackle pretty quick. You just have to figure out who your left tackle is. That's been solved really for the first, 3 of the first years of Kirby Smart with Isaiah, and then Andrew Thomas for 2 years. You lose Isaiah Wilson, Andrew Thomas. Those are your 2 tackles, so that's important. And then obviously losing Solomon Kinley is not ideal. But Solomon was sharing time with Justin Schaefer during the season. So you've got, now if you lose Ben Cleveland, that could be more complicated. But I'm not sure Georgia's really in as bad a shape as everybody wants to make it out to be. Whenever you lose a first-round guy like Andrew Thomas, that's not great. But you're losing a lot of important pieces. You're losing a first-round guy in Andrew Thomas. You're losing a first-round guy in DeAndre Swift. You're losing your starting quarterback in Jake Fromm, who's been there for 3 years but didn't have an unreal 2019. So if you want to be skeptical of the offense, that's fine. But this is still a program that, if you were skeptical of the offense this year, you had reason to be. They were just not great. Didn't score 30 points or more after the South Carolina game, and still managed to finish number 4 in the country. So, we don't know what the outcome is tomorrow night in New Orleans, but you could make a case that Georgia could be number 3 or 2. Those 2 teams that have played, Clemson and Ohio State, that's only if Clemson loses, of course. Those 2 teams had the benefit of getting to the playoff, not having to deal with LSU in their conference championship games. You have to wonder, if Georgia would have gotten in with a loss to LSU anyway. It looks right now like they probably wouldn't have, but the way they lost wasn't ideal. But boy, LSU has just been pounding everybody. We'll see what Clemson has to say about that when they get their shot in the Superdome. It's going to be a tough challenge for sure for Clemson. But with their whole mantra of nobody ever thinks we're going to do anything anyway, which is a ridiculous notion, maybe they're comfortable with it. But for Georgia's future, you got Jamie Newman, Carson Beck, Dwan Mathis, and Stetson Bennett, who are all going to be fighting it out for snaps. I don't think, as it stands today, if I know Kirby Smart at all, that they're going to have an entrenched starter going into the Virginia game. You probably will have a starter, The question is, how much will that person play versus the other person that will come in? And who would that number 2 be? I mean, if it's Carson Beck, that's your starter. That would be interesting because that would mean he will have come in and beat out an FCS starting quarterback and 2 other guys who have been around college football for a while. But I mean, that's not unheard of under Kirby. If Newman is your guy, how much of a fight did the other guys put up? And Stetson certainly knows Georgia's offense. I can't imagine Mathis doesn't know it at this point either, even though he's not exactly been physically participating with the more physical things that have been going on in practice. But I mean, I'm sure he knows what's going on, and he, of course, just like Carson, all 4 of these guys can run a little bit. All 4 of them can run a little bit, but with Newman, you've got a proven runner, a guy who got Wake Forest ranked in the top 20, which is pretty amazing this past season before their season sort of slipped away and fell apart. It's going to be an interesting spring, and you don't always say that at Georgia. I mean, you couldn't really say that going into 17, going into 18, and going into 19. Perhaps you could say that going into 18 just because Justin was there. But there was really, it was hard to imagine that Justin would start at Georgia going into the 18 season just because of how well Fromm had played before that and how up and down Justin was in practices. There were times, understandably, where he really had a hard time in spring of 18. There were times when he had a hard time in fall of 18, and there's no question Justin's a gifted special player, perhaps a generational player, but all these guys can't be generational. I mean, he might be, but I don't know. I don't know that anybody who's on Georgia's roster as it stands today at quarterback is a generational player, a Matthew Stafford type. So, or even an Aaron Murray type. So we'll see where the future goes, but the defense returning everybody basically is going to be hard to score on. It's going to be tough to score on Georgia. Scoring more than 20 points against Georgia has not been common under Kirby Smart. So this Georgia defense is going to be something to deal with for sure. We'll just see what it will be like in the fall. I mean, and guys like Trayvon Walker, Nolan Smith, you've got them for not just next year, but the year after that. Nakobe Dean, guys like that. I mean, so this is, well, Nakobe is I mean, who's going to play that other linebacker position that Tay Crowder played? It's not like you don't have options there. So virtually all of the defense is coming back for the Dogs. The question is, can this offense become more functional, particularly scoring more than 30 points a game? Is that something that we're going to see in the near future? I don't know. I mean, I don't really. It is January, I think 11th today or the 12th. I'm getting my days certainly very mixed up. It's the 12th, and I'm not the voice of God on these things. I don't know what's going to happen with these quarterbacks. I don't know that anyone knows. And I've learned over 20 years of covering college football and covering Georgia that you really need to see the proof in the pudding. And, there have been times when Jamie Newman really played well at Wake Forest. There were other times when things were underwhelming. And you can say that about a lot of college football players because that's the way most people are. Every day isn't a good day. The question is, which of these guys gives them the most, the widest window to get through, the biggest ability to make a jump on the offensive side of the ball? Because, what you're switching out, no matter which quarterback you bring in, you're switching out a lot of experience in the SEC with not much experience to none in the SEC, and you're switching out not a lot of athleticism with Jake Fromm, who is an athlete for sure, a baseball guy and a football guy, but not a run and jump guy. He's not no one's confusing him for playing basketball in college. So you're switching that out with 4 guys who are extremely athletic, I would say. How as coaches will Georgia, thread the needle here and, do different things perhaps. I mean, if Newman is running for 500 yards on the ground at Wake Forest, could he run for 300 in the SEC? That would be about what Shock did in 2005, and they won the conference that year. I mean, DJ threw, I think he completed 6 passes in the SEC championship game against LSU. Again, going completely off memory. And people are going to compare him with Newman, but Shock didn't run as often as Newman does currently. I mean, DJ was a pocket quarterback who wore out the tight ends, Leonard Pope. I mean, he had guys that he depended on, and he really took advantage of his situation. He was a product of a system. He was a fifth-year senior, had been at Georgia for a while, knew Coach Richt really well, and they cashed in. I mean, that was a big deal year for Georgia. And the biggest thing about that 2005 team, that was one of the wheelhouse times that I covered Georgia, was knowing a lot of those guys. They were tight. I mean, they were close, very close. I still remember the way that Mario Mentor, who I see occasionally in the recruiting world, how hurt he was when DJ was talking with us about being hurt. It was like a midweek day. It was maybe a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and DJ was down there talking with reporters. An injured player would never talk with reporters now at Georgia, but Shock was there. I don't think Tim Jennings was there. I can't remember. Shock was there, and I'm certain Mentor was there, but it was, I mean, they were sad. I mean, they were still an undefeated team, but they knew he couldn't play against the Gators, and that was a huge game. But Shock was, what Newman won't have is what Shock had pretty much the entire 2005 season. There was a lot of people that doubted what DJ could do because he did not play well against Georgia Tech in the final game of the season. He did not. There were moments like the 2003 game at LSU where, Shock, David got hurt, Shock went in there, and it was just, LSU was out for blood, and there wasn't anything anybody could do, and people formed their view of DJ on, the moments in time that were negative for Shock. They ignored the times that were so good. I mean, does Georgia beat Clemson in 2002 without DJ? Because David played bad in that game. I'm not sure if they do. I doubt it. Or it doesn't. He mattered in that game. And then people will talk about the 2002 Florida game. He threw an interception for a touchdown. Shit, Georgia had the lead at the half in that game. I mean, if memory serves correct, and even if it wasn't at the half, that was in the first half that happened. That was not the exclusive reason why Georgia lost to Florida. I was a big DJ Shockley guy. I thought David should have started when he started, but I thought the negativity going into the 2005 season was just exponentially larger than it should have been. DJ Shockley was a special quarterback, but really he was like a magnet. Those guys loved him. They loved him. Russ Tanner someone was in the other one's wedding. Those guys had not a lot in common. But Shock was the word leader is overused, but DJ was as close to that as you could see. And and that's not diminishing Matthew or David or Aaron or all these other guys. Joe Tereshinski was a great leader. He was not a very good quarterback. You got to have both. So if it's Newman, he's going to have to somehow get the locker room on his side while fighting off 3 other guys who are legit, players in their own right. It's just a different time. And, when you just look at the landscape of the SEC, there's questions everywhere. I mean, you look at Alabama, they're losing a lot of guys on offense. You're obviously Tua being the main one, and then the receivers, and Alabama's going to be a different team in 2020 than it has been in the recent past. They're going to have to score. They're going to continue to have to score because their defense is unproven. You look at the Gators. Everyone's talking about Kyle Trask coming back. He's got to play better too, though. I mean, like, those receivers are all gone down there, and they're going to get kids in. The tight end is a very good receiver, is a very good catcher. but their defense has got issues too. They lost a lot of guys. So there's a lot of transition in the SEC. At Dog Post, we're going to monitor everything, of course, starting with these 4 quarterbacks in the spring. Dean Legge for Dog Post, wrapping up to Sunday night show, Dean Legge Show here. Make sure you press the subscribe button. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you tomorrow on Dog Post.